Picture the last golf course you saw. Rolling green fairways, a putting green smooth as a pool table. Not a single dandelion, not one patch of crabgrass. Nothing out of place from the first tee all the way to the back nine. Now picture your own front yard. If you're like most folks watching this, there's a little clover creeping in near the driveway, maybe some crabgrass sneaking up through a crack in the sidewalk, and a few dandelions waving at you every time you pull in. So how does a place that thousands of people walk across every single week stay perfectly weed-free, while your quiet little yard turns into a weed buffet by the middle of June? It isn't money. It isn't some magic chemical locked in a shed you're not allowed to buy. It comes down to about $1 worth of prevention, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what that is. How does a golf course go from being nothing but bare dirt and grass seed to that flawless green carpet, and then stay that way for decades? Well, I've been taking care of lawns for a long time, and for years I wondered the same thing you probably have. I figured those groundskeepers had access to something the rest of us don't. Some special spray, some pro-only product hidden in a maintenance shed. But when I actually started talking to the folks who maintain these courses, the answer surprised me. It's simpler than you think. Almost everything they do, you can do too, in a normal yard, on a normal budget, with stuff you can buy at any garden center. They just do it in a certain order, and at a certain time. And that timing is the whole ball game. Let's clear up the biggest myth first, because it's the one that keeps people from ever trying. Most of us assume a golf course looks that good because they're pouring a fortune into it. Fleets of mowers, a crew of guys, tanks of professional chemicals. And yes, a championship course does have a budget and a full-time crew. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but here's the little detail almost everybody misses. The single most important thing a groundskeeper does to keep weeds off that course is not expensive, and it is not a secret product. The exact same active ingredient they rely on is sitting on the shelf at your local hardware store right now, in a bag that costs less than taking your family out for lunch. One bag treats a big chunk of a normal yard, and it lasts for months. So the money isn't the secret. The fancy equipment isn't the secret. Think about that for a second. The thing that actually keeps a golf course weed-free is something you could put in your trunk this afternoon for pocket change. The reason your lawn has weeds and theirs doesn't isn't the size of the wallet. It's the approach. And once you understand the approach, you'll never look at your yard the same way again. So what is the approach? It comes down to one word: prevention. Here's the difference, and it's the difference between a green golf course and a weedy yard. When you and I see a weed, we react. We spot a dandelion in the lawn. We go grab the sprayer. We hit it. We feel good about it. Then next week, 2 more pop up over by the fence, and we chase those. All summer long, we're playing whack-a-mole in the front yard, reacting to weeds that are already there. A golf course groundskeeper does the opposite. He doesn't wait for the weed to show up. He stops it before it is ever born. Because here's something a lot of people never learned about weeds. Crabgrass, clover, foxtail, most of the weeds that drive you crazy. They don't grow from a plant. They grow from a seed. Millions of tiny seeds sitting in your soil right now, just waiting for the right temperature and a little sunlight to sprout. The groundskeeper knows those seeds are down there, so instead of fighting the grown-up weed, he goes after the seed. He treats the soil before those seeds ever get the chance to wake up. No weed ever breaks the surface, so there's nothing to spray, nothing to pull, nothing to react to. And the tool he uses to do that is the dollar secret I mentioned. Let me show you exactly what it is. It's called a pre-emergent. And the name tells you everything. Pre meaning before. Emergent meaning the weed emerges from the ground. A pre-emergent is a product you spread across your lawn before the weeds come up. And what it does is beautifully simple. When you put it down and water it in, it settles into the very top layer of your soil and forms a thin, invisible barrier. It doesn't hurt your established grass at all. Your lawn keeps growing right through it, happy as can be. But when one of those weed seeds down in the soil tries to sprout and push a little root up through that barrier, the pre-emergent stops it cold. The seed never becomes a weed. It just quietly gives up. That's it. That's the big secret behind a weed-free golf course. Not a mystery chemical. Not a rich man's budget. A bag of pre-emergent granules spread at the right time that keeps the weeds from ever showing up in the first place. And this is the part I really want you to hear. That barrier costs almost nothing. The active ingredient works out to pennies per square foot. When you break it down over a whole treatment on a typical yard, you're talking about $1 or $2 of actual product doing the heavy lifting. $1. Trust me on this one. Once you start preventing weeds instead of chasing them, your whole relationship with your lawn changes. You stop dreading summer. You stop buying jug after jug of weed killer. You just don't have weeds. But there's a catch. A pre-emergent only works if you put it down before the weeds wake up. Miss that window even by a couple of weeks, and the seeds have already sprouted. Now the barrier is useless, because the weeds are already above the ground where it can't reach them. And here's what trips people up. That window isn't a date on the calendar. It's tied to your soil temperature. Crabgrass seeds, for example, start waking up when the soil warms to around 55 degrees. And that happens at different times depending on where you live and what the spring is doing that year. Put your pre-emergent down too early. It wears off before the seeds sprout. Too late, and you've missed your shot for the whole season. Now, getting that timing exactly right, year after year, in your specific yard, is the one thing I get asked about more than anything else. And it's the reason I sat down and put my whole system into one simple guide. It's called Larry's 30-Day Weed Kill Protocol. And it's the exact day-by-day plan I follow to stop clover, crabgrass, and those stubborn weeds before they ever start. It tells you precisely when to put your pre-emergent down for your season, which products to actually use, how to spot the 7 most common lawn weeds, and how to keep them from ever coming back. No fluff, no guessing, just the plan, written the same plain way I talk to you in these videos. It normally goes for $47, but for folks watching this it's just $17. The link is right down in the description, and that QR code on your screen will take you straight there. Go ahead, take a second, point your phone at it, and it's yours. All right. So the pre-emergent is the secret weapon, but it's really only the first layer of how a golf course stays clean. Here's where it gets good, because the next few things cost you nothing at all. Remember what I said about weeds needing 2 things to sprout: the right temperature and a little sunlight. The pre-emergent handles the seeds you can't see. But a golf course has a second line of defense that's just as important, and this one is completely free. It's density, thickness. If you look real close at a golf course fairway, the grass isn't just green, it's packed together so tightly there is no bare ground anywhere. Every square inch is covered, and that matters because a weed seed can't sprout without sunlight hitting the soil. When your turf is thick enough, the ground underneath stays shaded and dark. The seed sits there in the dark and never gets the signal to grow. Now think about the average homeowner's lawn. A thin spot by the mailbox. A bare patch under the shade tree. That strip along the driveway where the grass gave up years ago. Every one of those bare spots is an open invitation. Sunlight hits the dirt, and weeds move right in. Because in nature, bare soil never stays bare for long. Something is going to grow there. If it's not your grass, it'll be a weed. So the same goal a groundskeeper has every single day, is to make your lawn so thick that a weed simply has nowhere to move in. And no, I'm not making that up. A genuinely thick lawn is the best weed control there is. Most of what I'm about to show you is really just about getting your grass that thick. Which brings me to the biggest mistake I see homeowners make, and it's one that quietly invites weeds in every time they mow. Cutting the grass too short. There's a myth out there that if you cut it real low, you won't have to mow as often, and it'll look like a golf course green. And I understand why people think that. When you watch golf on television, those putting greens are shaved down almost to the dirt. But here's the thing nobody explains about those putting greens. A putting green is a special grass, grown on special sand-based soil, babied by a full-time crew, and mowed almost every single day. That's not your yard, and it never will be, and that's perfectly okay. Look instead at the fairways and the rough, the parts of the course that are more like a normal lawn. Those are cut much higher than people realize. And there's a reason. Taller grass has longer blades, and those longer blades shade the soil underneath. Remember our rule. Shaded soil means no sunlight for weed seeds, which means no weeds. When you scalp your lawn down short, you do the exact opposite. You expose the dirt, sunlight pours in, the soil heats up, and crabgrass in particular absolutely loves that. You've basically rolled out the welcome mat. For most common lawns, letting your grass grow to around 3.5 inches tall does more to fight weeds than any spray you could buy. It's simpler than you think. Raise your mower deck a notch, and you've just cut off the weed's sunlight without spending a dime. While we're on mowing, let's walk through 2 more habits that keep a course looking clean. Because it's not just how high you cut, it's how you cut. First, a sharp blade. A golf course crew keeps their mower blades sharp as a razor, and they sharpen them constantly. When a sharp blade cuts grass, it slices clean, and the grass heals fast. When a dull blade hits your lawn, it doesn't cut, it tears. It rips the tip of every blade of grass, leaving a ragged, shredded end. If you've ever mowed and your lawn looked kind of gray or brown a day or two later, that was a dull blade tearing your grass. And a torn, stressed lawn is a weak lawn, and weak lawns let weeds in. Sharpen your blade a couple of times a season. That alone makes a real difference. Second, the 1/3 rule. Never cut off more than 1/3 of the grass height in a single mowing. If your grass got tall while you were away on vacation, don't chop it all the way back down at once. That shocks the plant, thins it out, and opens up gaps. Take 1/3 off, wait a few days, then take a little more. It sounds fussy, but a groundskeeper lives by that rule. And it's a big part of why their turf stays thick and even instead of stressed and patchy. Now let's talk about water, because how you water might be doing more harm than you realize. Most folks water their lawn the way they'd water a houseplant. A little bit, often. A quick 10 minutes with the sprinkler every evening. It feels caring, but for a lawn, it's one of the worst things you can do. And here's why. When you give the grass a light little sip every day, the water only ever touches the top inch of soil, so the roots have no reason to dig down. They stay shallow, right at the surface, lounging in that easy water. A lawn with shallow roots is a weak, needy lawn that browns out the second it gets hot. And guess what thrives in that shallow, constantly damp topsoil? Weeds. A lot of weed seeds love exactly those conditions. A golf course waters the opposite way. Deep and not very often. They soak the ground good and thorough, then they let it dry out for a few days before soaking it again. When the water goes down deep, the grass roots chase it down, and you end up with a deep, strong root system that can handle heat and drought and crowds weeds out from below. So instead of a little every day, give your lawn a good long soak once or twice a week, early in the morning. Fewer waterings, deeper waterings. Your grass gets stronger, your roots go deeper, and the weeds lose the damp little surface they were counting on. Here's something a groundskeeper understands that most homeowners never think about. On a golf course, they're not really growing grass. They're feeding the soil and letting the soil grow the grass. A weed is an opportunist. It moves into ground where the grass is too weak or too hungry to compete. So the groundskeeper keeps the lawn well fed with the right nutrients at the right times. So the grass is always the strongest plant out there. A well-fed lawn grows thick and fast and simply outcompetes weeds for space, water, and light. It's the same idea as density, just working from underground. Now, I'm not telling you to dump fertilizer on your yard. Too much is as bad as too little, and it can burn your grass or feed the weeds right along with the lawn. The move that separates people who guess from people who get results is a simple soil test. For a few dollars, a soil test tells you exactly what your dirt is missing and what your pH is. Grass likes a pH in a certain range, and when your soil drifts out of that range, your grass struggles while certain weeds actually prefer it. A patch of moss or a lawn overrun with a particular weed is often the soil quietly telling you something is off. Feed the soil, get the pH right, and your grass does the hard work of fighting weeds for you 24 hours a day without you lifting a finger. Let me show you 2 more things a course does every year that fill in the gaps, literally. The first is aeration. Over time, soil gets compacted, packed down hard from foot traffic, mowers, rain, and just gravity doing its thing. Compacted soil is bad news because roots can't spread, water can't soak in, and air can't get down to where it's needed. And plenty of tough weeds, the ones with those deep tap roots, actually prefer hard, compacted ground, where your grass is struggling. A golf course pulls little plugs of soil out of the ground once or twice a year to loosen everything up and let the lawn breathe. You can rent a machine to do the same thing on a bigger yard or on a small one. Even a manual tool works fine. The second is overseeding. Right after they aerate, when the soil is loose and open, they spread fresh grass seed across the whole lawn. This is the piece almost every homeowner skips. Grass, like anything living, gets old and thins out over the years. If you never add new seed, your lawn slowly gets thinner and thinner. And remember what thin means. Gaps, bare spots, open doors for weeds. By aerating and overseeding once a year, usually in the fall for most lawns, you're constantly filling in those gaps with young, thick, healthy grass before a weed ever gets the chance to claim that spot. You're closing the doors before anything can walk through them. One more piece from the ground up, and this one people rarely think about. The right grass for where you live. A golf course doesn't just throw down any old seed. They choose grass types bred to grow thick, fight off disease, and thrive in their specific climate. And that matters, because a grass that's happy in your climate grows dense and strong all on its own, which, you guessed it, crowds out weeds. A grass that's fighting to survive in the wrong climate stays thin and stressed, and lets weeds take over. If you're up north, you're likely dealing with cool season grasses like fescue, ryegrass, or Kentucky bluegrass. Down south, it's warm season grasses like Bermuda, zoysia, or St. Augustine. This choice seems small to a lot of folks, but it isn't. Planting the wrong type for your region is like fighting with one hand tied behind your back all season long. When you overseed, make sure you're using a good quality seed that actually matches your climate. Get that right, and your lawn wants to be thick, which is half the weed battle won before you even start. Now, I told you at the start that the industry doesn't exactly shout this from the rooftops, and I want to be fair and honest about why, because it's not some evil conspiracy. A lot of people thought they had the full picture on this, and they didn't. Think about how a typical lawn spray service makes its money. They come out, they spray the weeds that are already there, and they come back again in a few weeks and do it again. Reacting to visible weeds all season means regular visits, and regular visits mean a regular bill. There's simply no money in teaching you to prevent weeds so well that you never need them again. The pre-emergent, the mowing height, the deep watering, the overseeding, none of that makes anybody a repeat sale. It just quietly solves your problem for pennies and sends you on your way. So it doesn't get talked about much. It's not that folks in the industry are lying to you. It's that prevention isn't a product they can keep selling you month after month. But now you know. You know the same handful of habits a professional groundskeeper uses to keep a golf course spotless, and you know that almost none of it depends on money or on hiring anybody. It depends on doing the right thing at the right time. One last thing, because I want you to have the full toolkit. What about the weeds that are already in your lawn right now today? A pre-emergent won't touch those, remember. It only stops new seeds. So for the weeds that are already up, you spot treat them. And notice I said spot treat, not blanket the whole yard. This is another thing a course does that homeowners get backwards. A groundskeeper doesn't soak the entire lawn in weed killer. He walks the course, finds the few weeds that slipped through, and treats just those spots, one at a time. It's cheaper, it's safer for your good grass, and it's better for the soil. So grab a small handheld sprayer, hit the dandelion or the clover patch directly, leave the rest of your healthy lawn alone, and let your thick turf and your pre-emergent handle the prevention going forward. Handle the stragglers you have now, prevent the rest, and you're running your yard like a pro. So let's put the whole thing together, the way it actually works across a season. It starts with prevention, that dollar's worth of pre-emergent, laid down at the right time before the weeds ever wake up. Then it's about density, keeping your lawn so thick and healthy that weeds have no room and no sunlight to move in. You mow high with a sharp blade. You water deep and infrequent. You feed the soil. You aerate and overseed to close the gaps. And you plant grass that actually belongs in your climate. And for the few weeds that sneak through, you spot treat them and move on. None of these are hard. Not one of them costs much. But they do have to happen in a certain order and at a certain time of year. And that timing is the thing that separates a lawn that just looks okay from a lawn that turns heads. Do them in the right sequence, and your yard starts to look after itself, the same way a golf course does. Remember that flawless green course we started with? The one without a single weed from the first tee to the back 9? You now know it was never magic, and it was never money. It was prevention, done in the right order at the right time. And every bit of it works just as well in your own front yard. Now, if you want that exact order and that exact timing laid out for you, day by day, so you never have to guess when to put your pre-emergent down or which weed you're even looking at, that's precisely what Larry's 30-day weed kill protocol is for. It's the whole system in one simple guide, the same plain-spoken plan I follow myself, for $17 instead of $47. And here's your honest reason to grab it today. Your pre-emergent window comes around just once a season, and if you miss it, those weeds come back for another whole year. The link's in the description, the QR code's on your screen right now. Get your plan in place, and let's finally get your lawn looking like that golf course. I'll see you in the next one.